morning and peace be upon you this beautiful Sunday or whatever day you're listening. Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show. This is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm your host, Qasim Rashid, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to thank you for your emails and notes. We've got a detailed, heavy show lined up today. Dr. Alvin Tillery is here. He's an academic and scholar in the DEI space with the ongoing attacks on DEIA in the new announcement from the new Attorney General that the DOJ is going to be prosecuting private entities who engage in DEI. Yes, private entities. They're not just going after federal government employees. No, they are going to be going after private entities who engage in DEIA. It's going to be an absolute crap show, and we need to be ready for it. So we'll talk about that. I want to talk about what the MAGA fascist plan is, and more importantly, what actions we can and should be taking right now to counter this MAGA extremism. I feel like there's so many people out there saying, hey, the world's on fire, the world's on fire. And then you ask them, well, where's the water to put it out? And they're like, I don't know. But here, look at this fire over here. And you ask them how to put out that fire, and they're like, I don't know. And then they just keep this outrage machine. And I'm not that guy. I really want to focus on solutions, and we're going to talk about that in detail today because we all know the world is on fire. We can feel the heat, and literally on fire. I was in LA a couple of weeks ago. We know the world is not in a good place right now, and I think people are less interested in being reminded that it's not in a good place and more interested in understanding what role they can play to counter that. So I want to spend the first part of the show talking a bit about kind of the crap that's happening and what we need to be aware of, because you can't cure a cancer unless you're aware of what the cancer actually is. So I want to do a quick dive into that, and then we'll bring on Dr. Alvin Tillery and talk about the work he's doing in the DEI space and framing kind of the historical context of this, and then we'll close out the show with the kind of the meaningful calls to action. And so if you want to skip ahead to that, the last 10 minutes of the show, still love you, won't blame you for it if that's really what you want to get out of it. But I want to provide a comprehensive uptake so you can listen to this on your drive or wherever it is you guys listen to the show. Let's start with this involvement of Elon Musk, a centibillionaire, this unelected bureaucrat, giving him control over Americans' financial data. So the backstory is Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who, by the way, 6 Democrats voted to confirm, has granted Musk full access to sensitive Treasury data, including Social Security numbers, Medicare payment systems. His cronies have gone on to reportedly block out government officials from their own systems. This means that Musk, a private billionaire with no official government position whatsoever, has direct access to federal grant and loan distributions, direct access to Social Security and Medicare benefit records, direct access to government contractor payments, including those that compete in direct opposition with his own companies. This is corruption by any other name. And there's no other way to describe it. This is bureaucratic corruption. This is oligarchy of billionaires controlling government. And by the way, Musk is the same guy who previously pressured Trump to fire the FAA administrator after the FAA fined his company SpaceX for safety violations. That administrator was fired on January 20th. And of course, we saw just a week later the horrific air collision caused by the lack of safety protocols in the FAA. And now Musk is given the most sensitive financial data. Look, this would be a conflict if Musk were an elected official, but the fact that he's being given unchecked power is just beyond the pale. In any other nation, this would be considered a military coup, and that's what this is. It's a hostile takeover. It's a billionaire coup. It's a constitutional crisis. And not 6, but 16 Democrats joined Republicans to confirm Bessent, who himself is a billionaire hedge fund manager. So, like, this is my frustration with the Democrats. Like, why are you a party to this at all? Like, what do you expect? Why are you trying to play ball with these guys? Obstruct them, because this is what you get when you play ball. You get our private information being given to a billionaire. Second thing that Trump is doing is weaponizing the justice system. He's firing FBI officials who investigated the insurrection. And I've got contacts in the DOJ who are giving me information behind the scenes, and they're telling me it's a crap show. Remember, Trump pardoned 1,500 white supremacist felons, including people who wore Camp Auschwitz shirts, actual Nazis who beat police officers to near death. Many of them actually died afterwards, several of them who did. People who openly called to execute public officials are now walking free in the streets. And now Trump wants to prosecute the FBI officials who convicted them. And again, this is where we are right now. Clearly, Trump does not support law enforcement. He supports law enforcement when it's a tool to uphold white supremacy. But between trying to fire the FBI officials, trying to fight 17 inspectors general, Trump is doing everything possible to remove any entity that can hold him accountable for his fascist actions. Number three, right after a pandemic, and by some arguments, we're still in a pandemic, Trump is censoring public health information. He's erasing critical medical information on contraceptive guidance, on HIV prevention, on studies on mental health in trans youth, in non-binary communities, data on bullying, suicide rates, drug use in marginalized communities. The Infectious Disease Society of America has condemned these removals, but Trump is gutting the CDC. He's gutting healthcare guidance. So if there is another outbreak, we'll have no idea on what to do. This will kill people. Guys, this is not like a hypothetical. This will kill people. He gutted safety protocols at the FAA, and we already saw the devastation there. This will kill people by gutting safety protocols with the CDC. Number four, he's reviving concentration camps. He's ordered DHS to prepare to detain up to 30,000 migrants at a concentration camp he's building out in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And I want to emphasize, this is not, people who are like, well, what America is this? This is the America it's kind of always been. Executive Order 9066 interned more than 100,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. Remember, we were at war with Japan, Italy, and Germany. No Germans or Italians were interned en masse. Only Japanese were. It's white supremacy. This is no different than Professor Whitman of Princeton University writes in his book, Hitler's American Model, that Hitler got his ideas for his Nuremberg laws from America's Jim Crow laws. He sent his lawyers in the 1930s to the United States to study American Jim Crow laws, and they returned to Germany and said, hey, those Jim Crow laws are pretty vicious. We Germans might be Nazis, but we're not Americans. That's what their conclusion was, that the American Jim Crow laws were so extreme that even Nazis couldn't get on board. So stop saying, I don't recognize this America anymore. This is what America has been for way too long. We need to make this not be America. Number five, shutting down humanitarian aid. He is gutting U.S. aid, shutting down almost all and firing almost all employees. Already, at least 56 senior officials have been placed on administrative leave. More than $1 billion in critical aid has been frozen. This means blocking food assistance, blocking medical aid for war-torn regions, blocking disaster relief programs. Again, people will die. And again, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Democrats joined Republicans in unanimously confirming 99-0. This is not just MAGA cruelty, it's bipartisan complacency. Number six, igniting a trade war. Trump is recklessly imposing a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, a 10% tariff on imports from Canada. Again, tariffs are not paid by foreign governments or foreign companies. They're paid by American consumers. And unsurprisingly, Canada and Mexico have already announced, and China have already announced counter tariffs to make things more expensive for Americans as well. This will skyrocket prices for us and make things more expensive than they already are. And then seven, and this is what we'll talk to Dr. Alvin Tillery about, this ideological purge, attacking DEI, silencing journalists. I've documented this before. He's purging non-white officials, political opponents, women, journalists from federal agencies and the Pentagon. He has canceled student visas for pro-Palestine protesters, a clear First Amendment violation. He's removed Politico, the New York Times, NBC from the Pentagon offices, replaced them with right-wing propaganda outlets like One American News, Breitbart, New York Post. He's forced out federal employees who are not, with the Trump agenda, whatever the hell that means, what means white supremacy. He's purged all DEIA verbiage. He's openly demonized Black and brown people, disabled people, women as a cause of America's problems. This is not about government reform. This is creating a one-party fascist state where Trump controls the media, purges opposition, and rules with unchecked power. And I promise we have actual solutions that we're going to talk about. But we're going to go to break. And when we come back from break, we will chat with Dr. Alvin Tillery. Alvin Tillery is a political scholar, academic, works in the DEI space. He's been around for decades in this space, one of the nation's leading voices, and he runs a super PAC to elect progressive folks, Democrats, to office on the state, local, and federal level. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Review Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back with Dr. Alvin Tillery after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit subscribe so we can continue to bring you this advocacy on the regular. I'm fortunate to have our guest today, Dr. Alvin Tillery. He is an academic and scholar, has worked in the DEI space. He's a political scientist for decades, and he's one of the national thought leaders in this space. Co-founder of the 2040 Strategy Group, does DEI training in the private sector, and someone who's written on this extensively. He's been in this fight in the political space for literally decades, and is one of the premier scholars in this space. And given the attacks on DEI, DEIA, and just the overt fascist rhetoric coming from the president, blaming Black and brown people and disabled people and women for the FAA debacle, claiming, having a spokesperson at the Pentagon who says that for there to be balance, we need more competent white men. Having an AG who is now going to be going after private institutions for so-called anti-white discrimination. It's critical we understand the context of what's happening, how we got here, and Dr. Tillery is here to help us understand that. Alvin, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're in a unique spot in history, but also not so unique. And I want to emphasize this part about it being not so unique. Second, I think we're in a unique spot in history because a lot of folks felt wrongly that the election of Obama meant we were in some kind of a post-racial world. That obviously was not the case. And I don't think we will ever get to a post-racial world unless we have a meaningful reckoning with the fact that this country was founded on the genocide of one people and the enslavement and genocide of another. And there were never reparations, never any kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Even post-Civil War, there was no consequences or accountability for states that enslaved people. And where we are now, I say, is not precedented, because I've always assumed that MAGA meant returning the United States to the Jim Crow period. And now, as we look at the policies being put forth, it is a clear strategy, in my view, to return to segregation, to deny people access to equal justice under law, the repeal of affirmative action, the demonization of CRT, and now the demonization of DEIA. This is just my observation as someone who's studied this for not nearly as long as you have. And so I'd love for you to kind of just share with the audience, what is your perspective on this? Where is this going to lead long term, and how should we be thinking about this?
Just exactly as you framed it. I mean, I think you've got a lot of skin in this game, your advocacy and your work as a lawyer, and you're running for office, trying to push the party to take these things seriously. So I mean, there's not a lot of daylight between you and I in how we see this. I think what I'd like your listeners to understand is that for the vast majority of our history, about 300 of our 400 years, we were a formalized racial caste system. And for another 50 of those years, we were an informal racial caste system, right? So, what Mr. Trump and his minions are doing, from the Nazi saluting Elon Musk to, the Fox News presenter Pete Hegseth, who, the first thing he did when he took over defense was cancel MLK and Black History Month celebrations. They are trying to return us to a time when the racial caste system was legal. And then beyond that, they're intent on valorizing white supremacy in the way that just about every president of the United States did from the founding up until the modern era, probably the post-Wilson era, is the first time that we get a president that are not publicly stating America is a white man's country and we're going to valorize white people, right? So that's what you have to understand. This is deeply rooted. Why about 25 or 30% of the country, feels bad if we're not valorizing white people, is because it is in the educational systems, the cultural systems, the public art, and that made them feel good in the absence of a real soul or anything else, right? And so Trump is one of these people, and he's supplying oxygen to those movements that think, things were better when all of these people of color weren't here, and when the blacks had no rights, and when the indigenous people were erased. And so that's the moment we're in. They are moving quickly to reconstitute the racial caste system.
And I want to double down on that point because when you have a behemoth that massive, that financially invested, you're not going to undo that just by one generation. You're not going to undo that by electing one black president or one black and Asian vice president. If anything, that's going to piss off the white supremacists even more to say, whoa, 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 we're losing our grip. We went from having 100% control to 95% control, and that's just unacceptable. We cannot tolerate. We feel targeted and attacked now. It's that when you've had privilege your whole life, equality feels like oppression. Well, we're not even at equality yet. We're certainly not at equity, certainly not an inclusion, but the mere thought of there being diversity is infuriating them to a point. I want to emphasize the economic harm that continues to perpetuate on Black and Brown communities, particularly Black communities in this space. Everything from, and I always cringe when people talk about the unity that we had on D-Day, the global unity that we had on D-Day, or the global unity that we had when the Treaty of Versailles was signed. And I remind folks that Black Americans fought in World War II, obviously, valiantly died in World War II, fighting fascism. My ancestors, South Asians, 2.5 million Indians, Pakistan didn't exist at the time, 2.5 million Indians fought in World War II. And I'm always reminded of the fact that when the Treaty of Versailles was finally signed and there was a big parade marching through the streets of Paris, Black and brown soldiers were told, you stay back. We want to put our best foot forward, so only white soldiers are going to be allowed to march. Here we are celebrating the defeat of fascism, the defeat of Nazi Germany, of Hitler, and then telling Black and brown people, no, 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 hold on. Not you. We don't actually mean you.
Yeah.
We just mean us good white folks against those bad white folks. Thanks for helping us defeat the bad white folks that we didn't like, but now you know your role. Go back to second-class status. And as you know, the GI Bill was denied to Black soldiers as
Yeah.
well. And so when we talk about someone like a Pete Hegseth, who has like literally, I mean, you look at Lloyd Austin compared to him,
Yeah.
it's like comparing Michael Jordan to, my 11-year-old who can't dribble a basketball twice without
Yeah.
and you just see, I think there's been 37 defense secretaries. 36 have been white men. One's been a Black man. And you just look at the qualifications, there's no comparison. Hegseth's qualification is that he's a white guy who sucked up to Trump.
Yes.
Um, and I don't want to discount the defense secretaries before him because I'm sure many of them were qualified as well. But
They were.
yeah, they were. But how do we convey to the masses that even someone like Hegseth is actually the norm in American history? When you look at the outrage over Ketanji Brown Jackson when she was nominated for a Supreme Court justice position, I did the research and I found out that I think 60 or 70 Supreme Court justices never actually went to law school. White men never actually even went to law school, and they were on the Supreme Court. And here you've got, Justice Jackson is undoubtedly one of the most objectively qualified people being demonized. So that's the part I'm struggling with, Alvin, is helping folks understand that what we're seeing is actually not unprecedented. It's not that like I don't understand where my country has gone.
Yeah.
It's been your country. How do we not see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, boy, Qasim, there's so much there. So I think first on Hegseth and Bondi and all of these people, they are. I mean, I've seen a lot of people of color Black and Asian, mostly some Latino as well on TikTok with their outrage, because we know that in corporate America, we know, for example, that for Asians in particular, but also Black and Latino workers to make it up the corporate ladder, they have to be so perfect, right? And then they're still overlooked for these prime C-suite and leadership roles, right? So when we were doing the affirmative action case, people were saying to me, "Oh, how is it that why are all the Asian American groups lined up in support of Harvard? Why are they like, why aren't they seeing?" And I'm like, have you been to corporate America? Like, if we take the logic of the Harvard case that like Asians are some super geniuses all the way through school, they've got play by all the rules, and you look at the Fortune 500 CEOs, and there's like two Asians, so like they are understand. Like my biggest thing when I go in to do corporate consulting, it's
Yeah.
like there's a kind of silent group of Asian and Black women and Latinas who are just been passed over for
Yep.
top leadership positions, right? So like they understand the complete fraudulence of someone like a Pete Hegseth
Yeah.
being elevated to that position, right? So they're
Yeah.
taking to Twitter and TikTok and they're saying, "Oh, these guys are DEI hires," right?
Yeah.
And I always say, like, no, they're not DEI hires. DEI hires are legitimately qualified people.
Thank you.
DEI hires are about opening up the process to make sure that those women and people of color are not discriminated. Pete Hegseth is a white supremacy hire.
That's right.
His lone qualification is that he's there to instantiate white supremacy throughout the Defense Department.
That's right.
And
And
that's
he
that,
doesn't make
right?
and he doesn't make that a secret either. Like he's
Doesn't
talked
make
about
that a
criticizing the
secret, right?
military. He's got the Nazi tattoos. Like this is not conspiracy. He's telling us
He's
this
telling us who he
in
is.
English. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like what I want to say to all of my Black and brown, people that I meet in the corporate sector and the governmental space, the first thing that you have to stop doing is thinking that this is about you or your qualifications. It
Right.
is not. It's about their ideology of white supremacy and them having the power to try to reconstitute that. So what we've got to do is call it what it is. They're not DEI hires, they're white supremacy hires. You're legitimate, they're not legitimate, right? So that's the first thing that we have to do. The second thing that we have to do is we have to acknowledge that deep history. It's like not only were the 2 million, South Asians who fought, nullified their history. Think about what Hegseth did with the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit.
Right.
Like
How do
the
I watch
Tuskegee
that?
Airmen are the most successful air defense group in the history of the country. Not just Black, period. They're the
Period.
original Top Guns, right? Everybody should know about them. But by nullifying that experience, nullifying that history, they can convince a certain segment of the population that you don't really have a stake in this country. There is no America without Black people, right? The
Period.
country is
Period.
only valuable because the slaves made it safe for others to immigrate. The slaves were brought here to protect the English from the indigenous populations, right?
Right.
And so understanding and rooting your history, no one should be able to drive you off. And then the third piece is, and my wife is an immigrant from West Africa, right? And I've taught scores of immigrant kids, African, Asian, Latino backgrounds in my time working at elite universities. And the hardest thing for them to square when they get to places like Harvard and Northwestern is that all of the work that their parents told them and pumped into them since they were young ones doesn't erase the racism that they're going to face when they
Yeah.
get onto those campuses, right? And so there's this kind of notion that the assimilation model, work hard, do well in school, go to a good school, get a corporate job, and then America will treat you fairly. What we've got to understand in this Trump era is that that assimilation model may work to get you a decent income if you're fortunate, but it doesn't change the structure of white supremacy in this country. And the only way to change that structure is to band together with progressive whites, who about 40 to 45% of the white population, my surveys show, understand the con. and
Right.
are pro inclusion, right? So
Yeah.
what Obama was able to do is get those people to band together. If we can do that and call out what we see honestly, we have a chance to survive and win. But these are very painful lessons for people to absorb.
Right.
Very hard for people to wrap their minds around. But then you have a Trump who doesn't give you a choice but to absorb these lessons, right?
Just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. Alvin Tillery, an academic and scholar who's worked in the DEI and corporate consulting, political consulting space for decades, one of the national voices in this subject matter. And you know, Alvin, you went to Morehouse for undergrad, you went to Harvard
Yeah.
for your grad, and you talk about how that was a culture shock. And I want
Yeah.
to add from because I want to ask you about that and add this context to one thing you said earlier about kind of the Asian Americans who are on board with repealing affirmative action. I mean, and I'll say this as an Asian American, um, those Asian Americans became the mule for white supremacy. They
Absolutely.
the jackasses for white supremacy,
Yeah.
and they directed their ire at Black Americans, at Black students, when in reality, if those foolish people give a damn about merit and meritocracy, they would have been aiming their arrow specifically at legacy admissions. Recent
Yeah.
study of Harvard legacy admissions showed that those white students who were admitted on legacy, first of all, white students make up 43% of Harvard's body
Yeah.
here, and three-quarters of them, three-quarters of Harvard's white legacy admissions would not have qualified on merit, meaning that their
That's
grades
absolutely right.
were too low, their test scores were too unqualified for them to get admission. But
Yep.
because their grandfather or grandmother or father or mother went to Harvard during Jim Crow white supremacy America, where Black
Yes.
people were denied, they got admission over a more qualified Black or brown person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Or
and,
or, or
and
white
the lack of
person as well.
outrage there is hypocrisy is just astounding to me. But yeah, your thoughts on that, because I suspect the culture shock you experienced, especially from coming from a place like Morehouse, was related to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I've met a lot of colleagues and students who come from immigrant backgrounds, African, Asian, South Asian, what have you, and they like the shock of the racism that they experience at these institutions is very painful for them. Now my story is different. I grew up in the integration generation. So
Yeah,
I grew up with white people literally trying to kill me when I was a grade schooler, right?
yeah,
So like I was not surprised by anything that white people have thrown my way. In fact, on the contrary, I was surprised as a young person when white people were kind to me, when white people saw me as their equal, when white teachers at Harvard took me under their wing. That
sure.
was the shock for me, right? But leaving Morehouse College, which was a system really, again, to propel Black people into integration, right? I thought, okay, like I'm the best of my class here. I'm going to Harvard. Harvard is a liberal space, right? It's in
Allegedly,
Massachusetts,
yeah,
allegedly liberal space. And then you get there, and it's like the place is filled with scientific racists on the faculty, talking about how black brains are not capable of getting high test scores. And then what's so interesting about the test score thing is when you are a grad student at Harvard, you quickly become a teacher. So my
mm,
second year at Harvard, I'm teaching dozens of undergraduates by myself, and
yeah,
we're talking about these issues. And what's so interesting, Qasim, is that the students that you're referencing, the 43% of white students who are unqualified, save but that legacy mission, they talk openly about it. Because oh yeah, like I did terribly on the SATs, but like my dad hired a coach to move in with us for 6 months, and then they would drill me every day after school, and I jumped 300 points, and then oh I had this coach help me write my essays, and it's like that's the gap. Right, that's what we don't see when you're on the other side of that divide. But the same Harvard that is scrambling to punish students for saying free Palestine,
yeah,
right, was the Harvard that told Claudine Gay and me that the Confederate flag can fly freely here. Sorry, like, anti-black racism is really, it's the price of being at Harvard, being in an open community with free thinkers, Mr. Tillery, where anything can be said, where there's free speech absolutism. That's the price of being here, right? So, I mean,
Yeah,
I literally went through graduate school thinking, well, of course, my white supremacist students, some of whom are in Congress now, of course they have a right
yeah,
to say, that black people are, genetically, inferior. I don't agree with that. But I have to give them their space to say that, right? And so,
yeah.
that was the biggest shock for me. Um,
The double standards there. And I mean, and
yeah,
even right now, and by the way, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. Alvin Tillery, one of the nation's leading experts in DEI and political consulting in this space. Even now, I just saw somebody on Twitter make this point. I'm seeing more outrage from Democratic leadership at those Justice for Palestine protests than I am at Elon Musk literally taking over the Treasury Department and commandeering trillions of dollars worth of payments. Like, it makes no sense to me, the lack of urgency. A white South African apartheid era centibillionaire can come in and undermine our entire democracy, our entire republic. But the real threat are a couple of kids wearing a Free Palestine T-shirt, marching in the quad, saying "Stop committing genocide." It's just, if that to
yeah,
me isn't a like a microcosm of the white supremacy today, I don't know what is.
yeah.
So
No, it's a great stain on the Biden administration.
yes, it is.
To have allowed these kinds of framings of the student protests without any pushback is a stain on the Biden administration. And now we see that it's fueling a new era of loyalty tests and preemptive discipline of young people that is going to be it's reminiscent of what we saw during World War II
Right.
with the peaceniks and the communists. It's reminiscent of what we saw during the Vietnam era. And for me, like I'll just be clear, I've never been an advocate for completely absolute free speech on these
Right.
campuses. I do think if you're threatening people or there's sort of hate speech should be moderated, right? But now with all of these Department of Education investigations against what happened a year ago or a year and a half ago, right,
Yeah.
with student protesters, that's really meant to send a chilling effect. And the fact that people don't see that it's really not about even the Free Palestine protests, it's about quelling future protests. Because let's go back to something that you said, the root of this reaction in recent history, which scared the heck out of the elites, is that they saw their white children and grandchildren out in the streets in the summer
I'm
of
sure.
2020 marching for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And
Yeah,
that's when we first saw the crackdown on university speech
that's
in
right.
places like Florida and Texas. And this is all an extension of that, in my view. So it's
No, I
dangerous.
think
It's very
it's a great.
dangerous.
No, that absolutely played a significant role. I recall the George Floyd protests because it was simultaneously with the COVID lockdowns, and there was kind of this weird, like, what do we do? Do we protest in public? Are we allowed to be by each other? There's social distancing, and you obviously saw people make a mockery of COVID by saying, like, well, obviously it's not that serious if we can still march the streets, but broader. I recall even marching with conservatives who then turned around and mocked it on Facebook and said this is just a way for, I don't think the anti-woke movement had become what it is now, but this is just a way for, more bluntly black people to air their grievances and force us to feel guilty about who we are.
Right.
And I saw the writing on the wall, like, okay, this is a very sinister way of looking at this, and it's going to get worse. And unfortunately it has. And I think part of the reason why it's gotten worse is we don't have an effective counter narrative.
No.
The New York Times just ran a story, and I got you know destroyed in a couple of posts by people criticizing me for being critical of Democrats for not having a message. And the New York Times just ran a story interviewing 50 Democrats, and the consensus is we don't have a message, we don't have a leader, we don't really know what.
Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, if you're gonna be critical of Republicans for following a cult leader, but then you're not gonna be critical of your own party for not doing their job, then you're also in a cult. I'm sorry, but you are. Like, I'm not here to play favorites. I'm here to uphold justice, and justice demands we hold our own accountable as well. And the lack of accountability of our leadership is mind-boggling to me. It's disgusting to me because it is enabling the destruction of our republic. Now, are MAGAs responsible? Sure. But you're supposed to be the opposition party. You're supposed to be the party who is supposed to lead by example. And you can't do that if you don't have a message, if you don't have a clarity. We're down to our last 5 minutes, Alvin. And I wanted to spend the last part of the show. My listeners know this, that the reason why I bring on the guests that I bring on is because not just because they're super smart and talented at what they do, but also because they're doing the work where the rubber meets the road. They're doing the work on the ground. I'd love for you to talk a bit more about the work you're doing to counter this fascism, counter this white supremacy, build a more meaningful, representative, inclusive, compassionate society, and what folks can do to support your work, to get involved, and to play a role in helping counter this downward spiral that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I mean, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keep speaking out and keep, using my expertise to provide people context. Also, I started a super PAC, which we were active through the election cycle, trying to mobilize young Black voters and their allies. It's called the Alliance for Black Equality. So folks can visit the allianceforblackequality.org and join us. What we're doing right now is we're trying to use the outsized pressure that Black voters, progressive white voters, voters of color have on the Democratic Party in local environments, large cities, state legislatures, to pass laws that will keep us all safe despite what Mr. Trump and his minions do at the federal level. And now I'm aware of the supremacy clause. There may very well be an end game to that strategy. But the way that we're framing these laws is sort of to re-articulate some of the principles that the Republicans are now using against us, just turn it back on them. So you referenced this thing about legacies, right? We should be filling the courts right now with lawsuits saying that the legacy admissions is a kind of racial consideration that should be off the table. So these are the kinds of things that we're doing to push back. I'm not certain that while we're out of power for the next 2 years, the federal level is going to see much positive change unless we get out into the streets, talk general strike, paralyze the economy. I think we would have a chance to win at the national level. But before all that happens, we need to protect ourselves in Chicago, New York, Los
Right.
Angeles, San Francisco. And if you can do that, if you can put regulations on the large businesses that are operating in those environments, the other states will have to come along. So that's the project that we're working on at the Alliance for Black Equality for the next several months. And we're already seeing some traction in our home state of Illinois. So
The Alliance for Black Equality, what is the website for that, Alvin?
allianceforblackequality.org.
Okay, pretty easy to remember. I
Yep.
I um I was actually heartwarmed to see ICE complain that activists in Chicago have educated migrants so effectively that they're having difficulty arresting migrants because they know their rights so well. And like, how can you be an ICE agent, make that comment, and not think to yourself, wait, are we the baddies? Like, are we the problem here? Like, we're complaining that they know the Constitution too well. Like, there's a reason why the Constitution exists. It's to ensure your rights are protected from government overreach. And for as much as I hear MAGAs talk about tyrannical government, when we actually see tyranny, suddenly they're upset that how dare these people exercise their rights.
Well,
Alvin,
you framed it at the beginning like they believe those rules are only for white people.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
so that's their frame.
Yeah, no, that you're
Yeah.
you're exactly right, and I wish we had more time because I would have loved to get into things like the achievement gap. It's not a matter of anything other than are we making the investments in Black and Brown
Yeah.
communities? And we're not.
Yeah.
It's just
We're
fundamentally,
not.
if I say, Alvin, you and I are going to race and we get to buy our cars, and you have $2,000 to buy a car, and I have $200,000 to buy a car, I can't sit there and call you a bad driver after that when you're driving a $2,000 car and
That's
I'm driving
right.
a $100,000 car. I mean, that's just fundamentally the point here. Alvin, a privilege to have you. How can folks connect with you? How can they contact you if they have more questions, if they want to reach out?
Just go to the allianceforblack.org. You can fill out our contact form, or you can reach me at the 2040 Strategy Group, our email contact there as well. And we are a citizen organization. We are not like these super PACs that are out here trying to make money. Everything we spend moves right into advancing these causes. And we are not a we are a democratic group. We love ideas. If you can't share a dollar with us, write us an email and tell us what you think we should be doing. There's a good chance we'll listen to you.
Amazing. And I can attest to that. I've worked with Alvin in the past, and he is kind as he is gracious and honest. And it's a privilege to have him on the show. Alvin, we'll have to have you back on soon.
Thanks so much.
Dr. Alvin Tillery, academic and scholar of the DEI space. Check him out at the allianceforblack.equality.org. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. That was Dr. Alvin Tillery. Check him out at the allianceforblack.equality.org. He does brilliant work. He's really a brilliant person who's done the work. He's walked the walk. He's the guy you call to make sure the job gets done right the first time. And somebody I deeply admire, and I'm glad we had a chance to bring him on the show today. As I promised, I wanted to end the show the last 10 minutes by talking about how do we respond with meaningful action. It's one thing to talk about everything wrong, about kind of what's happening in the world, but stopping there to me is kind of useless. Because while it is important to acknowledge and to document and to make sure people are aware of what's happening, it's also not helpful to get folks outraged and riled up without an actual outlet for that rage. And my goal is to channel that rage, to embrace that rage, and to make sure you know that we have steps forward. So let's talk about 7 different things that we need to be focused on right now. Number 1, if you're a federal employee, do not comply in advance. Use all legal means at your disposal. The 8 FBI agent executives that Trump tried to fire are now suing Trump to prevent being fired. The 17 inspectors general who Trump tried to fire are refusing to comply, citing the fact that he did not follow proper procedure to fire them. They're forcing him to jump through every single hoop to get what he wants. So if you're a federal employee, contact employment attorneys in your area. Speak to labor rights organizations. Understand your rights. Know your rights. Get in good trouble, as John Lewis reminded us throughout his life. Fight tooth and nail for your position, as your actions are going to set a precedent for the future and set that precedent of resisting autocratic termination. Look, there are 2.3 million federal employees. If all 2.3 million use their full constitutional protections to drag out every case imaginable and clog up the legal system to counter Trump's fascism, then we're going to make some meaningful progress. We will slow down his autocracy. We will slow down his fascism. Do not capitulate to his extremism. Use the full power of the law. 2, Democrats in Congress, do something more than tweet your outrage. And this is what I want each of you to call Democrats and ask them these questions, because the apathy and the silence is pathetic. People are angry, they're tired, they're confused, they're wondering where the hell you are. And so here's the questions I want you to ask your Democratic members of Congress. Who is your party leader who should be coordinating all this counter-fascism work that isn't happening, by the way? Who's calling the shots? Do we even have a leader right now? 2, where are the daily press conferences and media blitzes documenting Trump's fascism and giving us this play-by-play of how we are responding? 3, where are the protests by members of Congress on the Capitol? On the Capitol steps like the ones that former Congressman Cori Bush held in 2020 to protest the end of the rent moratorium during COVID. 4, where are the Senate investigations into Trump's corruption? Where are the investigations into Musk's illegal access to the Treasury? How are you protecting our sensitive data? 5, where is the guidance from you on what to do if care is denied, or if Where are the resources on getting accurate healthcare information now that it's no longer on the federal website? Where are the guidances if our SNAP or TANF or Section 8 is denied? Where do we go? We have no idea. 6, where are the lawsuits to clog up Trump's fascist executive orders? God knows that Republicans filed lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit every time Biden breathed or issued an executive order. To this day, well, Biden couldn't cancel student debt because Republicans filed a lawsuit. Oh, so lawsuits work. Well, then where the hell are your lawsuits? You can't sit here on one hand and tell me, well, we couldn't cancel debt because Republicans filed a lawsuit and that was just too much for us to overcome. And on the other hand, be like, well, we don't know what to do to Trump's executive orders. We have no idea. Like, do you hear yourself? It's pathetic. Where are the lawsuits? There should be lawsuits on every single executive order right now. You know, Republicans, between lawsuits and floor votes, have tried to repeal the ACA more than 100 times, even when they were in the minority. And now they're going to succeed and successfully repeal the ACA, kicking 20 million Americans off healthcare. If Republicans can organize this effectively to strip our healthcare, then why the hell can't you organize even half as effectively to protect our basic human rights? The co-executive director of Indivisible, Leah Greenberg, pointed out, she goes, Democrats can oppose all Trump nominees. They can deny unanimous consent to slow down Senate proceedings. They can vote no on all calls for cloture. They can force quorum calls at every chance. It's a constitutional crisis. There's absolutely no reason the Senate should be conducting business as usual. And by the way, every single thing I've said is wholly within the control of Democrats, even in the minority. Yet we're seeing virtually none of it. Call your members of Congress, tell them to stop hiding behind the excuse of being a minority and show a goddamn spine for a second. Start working with the awesome power of Congress afforded to you. If I see Chuck Schumer tweet one more time, nachos are going to be expensive at the Super Bowl, you can thank Trump, I'm going to scream. We may not have a republic in a week, and you're worried about nachos. Give me a break. Everyone. Point 3 is for everyone. Activate. Get involved in your local politics. It affects you more than you realize. Who's your local school board member? Who's your city council person? Who is leading your local immigrant rights organization? Get involved. Show up to the next meeting. Make your local elected officials understand what you need. Does your local police department have a contract with ICE to round up immigrants? Work with your city council to break that contract because that's a local decision. Be present. 4, communicate. As I said, contact your member of Congress, but also contact your local nonprofits and let them know that you are there to volunteer and that you can help. 6, invest. Invest your time, your money into the people and organizations doing the work. If you have time to volunteer, volunteer, make phone calls, knock doors, sign petitions. You have financial resources to donate to organizations, to the people doing the work to protect our democracy, then donate. Even a few bucks a month goes a long way. And if you're under 40, especially, consider running for office. Reach out to Run for Something, runforsomething.net, and get started. If you're over 40, still run for office, but especially young people, run for something. Number 6, educate yourself. It is critical we remain informed on the key issues. Every study shows that the more informed folks are, the more likely they are to vote for politicians who are in their best interests. The less informed they are, the more likely they are to vote for Trump. Invest in independent media. As corporate media continues to capitulate to billionaire fascism, invest. Support writers like yours truly, a human rights lawyer working to stop fascism. If you're listening on Substack, hit subscribe because we need your support. It helps us get the message out. Read the work of nonprofit media like ProPublica, The Appeal, and more. We may not have the billions of dollars, but we have strength in numbers. And finally, organize. Each one reach one. You are the best ambassador for the justice, for the advancement of justice in your friend group. Lead by example. Grab one friend, drag them with you to the next school board meeting, city council session, next phone banking session, your town hall. We need to build organizational capacity. Join the general strike at generalstrikeus.com. The goal is to reach 11 million Americans, and they're at about 300,000. Be part of the 11 million. Look, folks, we've got work ahead of us. The Southern strategy never stopped. Capitulation of MAGA fascism is made possible because so many are willing to embrace culture wars to distract from the economic injustices as long as it gives them the perception of racial superiority over Black and brown people. Let's reject these culture wars and recognize that billionaire oligarchs will undermine the humanity in all of us, left or right, if it makes them a few extra bucks. We need unity, and that is how we fight back, through relentless resistance, organization, and action, as I've described above. So resist, activate, communicate, invest, educate, organize, subscribe, and share. Get involved. Do not let legality and power be a measure of morality and justice. It never has been. Instead, recognize the need for justice and uphold justice as your top standard. You have my commitment to continue to fight for that, and I need your support. Thank you, my friends, for tuning in to another episode of the Qasim Rashid Show. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Be sure to follow me on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Like I said, great show lineup for next week. So be sure to tune in. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Till next week, peace.